Hi, it's Joanna Martin here with a second little tidbit from my Feminine Way to Wealth events. In the last one, I talked about a redefinition of wealth and why it was so important. And it's because I suggested that we as women need to become vessels or a conduit for the great universal abundance. Why? Why do we need to do this? Well, the answer comes from something that the Dalai Lama said at the 2009 Vancouver Peace Summit. Now, here's a man who's dialed in. Here's a man who's connected to source if anyone ever was. And when he says something, I listen, and I'm sure that you're the same. What he said at this Peace Summit is that the Western woman will change the world. Now, I find this really interesting. I think none of us would deny that there's a lot going on in the world right now that needs changing. It's not sustainable. There's a lot of, insustainability going on at the moment globally, environmentally, with our financial, structures, with even in society and culturally and behavior-wise. So much of this is not sustainable. Something's going to give. And I think globally at the moment we're seeing this shift very much back into, the sacred feminine, the divine feminine, if you like. What I think the Dalai Lama was getting at here, though, is that we as women in the West have not only the resources or access to resources to make massive change, we also have access to our own inner resources, and it's that's going to make us make the difference. Why women, not men? Well, let me explain this by giving you a bit of an example. I was just recently in Santorini, down at Akrotiri. And at Akrotiri in Santorini, there's an incredibly well-preserved prehistoric town, if you like. Because when the volcano erupted, it was all covered in volcanic ash, much like Pompeii, which is its more famous kind of cousin. We see this prehistoric town, which has been preserved. And as I'm reading through the brochures and the interesting things around it, what they say is it's incredible how big the houses are, how wealthy they are. Every house is massive and 3 stories. This is 1600 BC was when it got covered in ash. So we're talking about 6, 7, 8,000 years ago was when this was all being lived in and being created. 3-story houses with underground sewerage, you name it, a very wealthy society. They said we found no evidence of a palace, so there are obviously no kings. Interesting they talk about kings, not queens, right? And also they said, so we think this society was headed by priests. Again, not priestesses, but priests. If we look at the history of the goddess, we can see what was going on there in this Minoan civilization. And what we see is that they were worshipping a female divinity, a female goddess, not a god. Mother Nature, the great feminine principle, was what they were worshipping in this society. When that's the case, we have women who are at the head of the church, the churches, of the temples and so on. We have women who are respected, and the feminine principle is revered and honoured in a civilization. Now, things shifted around 6,000 years ago, and we shifted from a feminine divinity to the more masculine divinities that we see around us at the moment, and we shifted to a more patriarchal society. Interestingly, a lot of changes have pursued because of that. But back then, when women were honoured, revered, when the feminine was honoured and revered, women were in charge of the wealth. And when women are in charge of the wealth, what occurs is the wealth is distributed equally among all. And we see evidence of this at Akrotiri and many other sites in Sumer and well back, where everyone is equally wealthy, and not just, a bit okay, surviving. We're talking really wealthy here. This is why it's women that are going to change the world, I think, because when we have wealth, we don't hold it. We become a vessel and a conduit for it. When we become wealthy, we share it with our families, our children, our cousins, our brothers, our sisters. When we become wealthy beyond that, we share it with our communities. When we're wealthy beyond that, we share it with the globe. That's why it's women that are going to be at the real root cause of this shift. And why the Western woman? Because it's we who have access to resources that women in developing countries can only dream about. I do a lot of work with the Hunger Project, and I've recently been on a trip to Bangladesh, and what women there do with next to nothing puts most of us to shame. So really it is tantamount to us to make this difference. When I heard that quote from the Dalai Lama, that it's the Western woman that will change the world, I heard it not as an observation, but as marching orders. It's up to us, it's up to you to harness your ability to be a conduit for the great universal abundance, channel it through your business or your career or your profession, whatever it is, and make your difference in the world. Being a money monk, saying that, money is not important to me, other things are more important, there's no longer space for that. It's time for you to step into who you truly are, not just as the great biological abundance that you are, but as the incredible conduit for wealth that you can be. We'll be talking about this and much, much more at our Feminine Way to Wealth event. So I really hope you can join us. Seats are selling out very, very quickly. So please do register at femininewaytowealth.com. And in our next little tidbit, I'll share one more tidbit with you from the event. I'll be sharing a little bit about what a money monk is and why you don't want to be one anymore, why it's time to really start channeling and becoming that wealthy woman that you can be.